said, I'm Keeley Hall. I lead our Williamson County market for Wilson Bank and Trust. And we do have a Williamson County market. For those of you who are not yet aware, we do have a branch in Cool Springs and a branch in Maryland Farms. We're looking to move as well into Nolensville and a little bit further south in Lake County in the very near future. And so we are thrilled to be a part of Williamson Inc.'s presentation here on real estate today and the state of where we are. Speaking of the state of where we are, you may or may not be aware, depending on the circles that you run around in, that the banking environment is changing significantly in Middle Tennessee. There have been several mergers, even in the last few weeks, that have been announced, and there are fewer and fewer local banks where decisions are all made locally by Middle Tennessee residents who work in Middle Tennessee, who go to church in Middle Tennessee, who eat at Corky's. Fewer and fewer of those institutions will exist as we go into the next few years. But one of those banks that does still exist is Wilson Bank and Trust. In 1987, we were founded by a group of businessmen in Lebanon, Tennessee, because an outside market bank had bought a local bank. And they felt with their entire being, as well as their pocketbooks, that there needed to be a local bank to serve local needs. And they founded Wilson Bank and Trust in 1987. Now, 38 years later, we have 33 branches all across Middle Tennessee, down into Chattanooga as well. And we're a $6 billion asset bank. So we do like to say that we're large enough to serve your needs, but we're small enough to know who you are, to meet you where you live, to meet you where you work, and make sure that we are here in your community to get you there, wherever it is that your vision takes you. Thank you. We're proud to sponsor this event. Look forward to hearing all that we have to come.
Thanks so much, Keeley. You'll actually hear from Keeley as part of the conversation after the presentation today. Really appreciate it. Not just sponsoring this, but I always want to talk about the way Wilson Bank supports our schools as well. A big sponsor of the Entrepreneur and Innovation Center, and really appreciate everything Wilson Bank does for not just us, but for the entire Middle Tennessee region. I also want to take a minute to thank United Communications for their support of the event, and Williams County Association of Realtors. Please join me in giving them a hand. Appreciate their support of today's event. Couldn't put these events on without our sponsors, so I greatly appreciate that. Williamson Inc. is referred to and really has the tagline of where community meets opportunity. And one way to define opportunity is careers. We want to attract, retain, and develop careers in Williamson County so your kids and grandkids can move back and have a life here. Don't have to go to Charlotte or Atlanta or Chicago. They can have that career right here in Williamson County. But we know it's incredibly hard to do with the skyrocketing home prices in Williamson County. Williamson County is a family-first community. It's in our DNA. It's what makes us different, what makes us special as we go across the country and have conversations about people moving here and investing here. But it's hard to live up to that reputation if we deny our kids the opportunity to move back to the place where they grew up. So I think that's why this study, and really more importantly what happens after this study, is so important to the future of this community and the future of your kids and grandkids. As we set the stage for this presentation, an important conversation, I'm thrilled to introduce my friend, the CEO of Williams County Associated Realtors, Bo Patton, to introduce the study's author, and Bo will come back with us for the conversation after as well. Bo?
Thank you, Matt. On behalf of the Williamson County Association of Realtors, I'd like to welcome you all here today. Anytime that we can partner with our friends at Williamson Inc. and other good community stakeholders and partners on data like this, I think you all are going to be very impressed with this data. I'll talk a little bit here in a second how the study was born out of. But I did want to give one shout out today. I know we have several elected officials with us in the room today, but I would be remiss if I didn't recognize one and offer a special thank you and everything, and that's to say, Rogers, you are going to have huge shoes to fill. You are a true leader of this county and this community, and for all your years of service to this community, I want to personally say thank you. So the Williamson County Association of Realtors has a very special privilege of being on the Franklin Housing Commission. of which Alderman Potts is the liaison for that within BOMA. And I sit on that board on behalf of our association, along with Jeffrey Caruth and many others, who's on our board of directors, and many others that I see in the audience. And as that group has tried to tackle the challenges that we face here in Franklin and Williamson County about attainable housing, we realized kind of early on this year that the last time a comprehensive housing study has been done for Franklin was actually 2014. And of course, our county, our community, our city has grown drastically since 2014. And we realized we needed newer, more updated, more comprehensive data. So the Williamson County Association of Realtors, we reached out to the National Association of Realtors, who has access to research firms, some of the top research firms all across the country. And they connected us with Patrick Bowen of Bowen National Research. And so we began the process as an organization to work with Patrick and his team to help put together this comprehensive study. This process began early in the spring. We put together a group of community stakeholders. Many of you all are in this room. It included representatives from the business community, representatives from the county employers, Williamson Inc. We sent out employer surveys. It was an extremely comprehensive study, and when you all see this data, I think you will realize that. Let me tell you a little bit about Patrick, and then we will get started. Patrick Bowen, president of the Bowen National Research, has conducted numerous housing needs assessments and provided consulting services to city, county, and state development entities as it relates to residential development, including affordable market rate housing for both rental and for sale housing, and retail development opportunities. He has also prepared and supervised thousands of market feasibility studies for all types of real estate products, including housing, retail, office, industrial, and mixed-use development since 1996. He has worked closely with many state and federal housing agencies to assist them with their market study guidelines. He has a bachelor's degree in legal administration with emphasis on business and law from the University of West Florida, and currently serves as the chairman of the National Council of Housing Market Analysts. So without further ado, Patrick, welcome to Franklin and Williamson County, and we're excited to see your data.
All right, let's take this off here. Well, thank you for having me. Thanks, Bo, for introducing me and for your help on this journey for the last several months. Again, Patrick Bowen, president of Bowen National Research. We're an Ohio-based firm, but we actually do work all over the United States. We've worked in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands. So bring a national base of information and knowledge to the Franklin and Williamson County area. And so I think you'll see some of the benefits of that in this presentation today, and then the study itself. I was packing yesterday, and my niece said, "Uncle Pat, where are you going?" She's 11-year-old, she lives with me. And I said, "I'm going to Nashville, Tennessee. Do you know where that is?" And she said, "Oh, isn't that where Taylor Swift's from?" And I was like, "Well, Taylor Swift probably has like 25 houses in the United States." So she's like, "Do you think she'll be there?" I was like, "Oh, Taylor knows I'm here. She's going to come." So you guys got it. If she ever asks, if you ever meet my niece, tell her Taylor was here with us. All right. So I only have about 25 minutes, so what you're going to see is the highlights. There is a lot in this study. So you can see on the left-hand side, the focus is Franklin, but with that said, you will see stuff for the balance of the county. So you'll see tables, or you may hear me say, I'll try to do a better job of this, but you'll hear references to primary study area, or PSA, that's Franklin, and then the rest of the county is the SSA, or secondary study area. So I'll talk about both, but again, much of the focus is on Franklin, but the study, again, gets into both areas. So we looked at a lot of different demographics, economics, obviously it's a housing study, so we looked at a lot of housing information, both rentals and for sale. We looked at transportation, development opportunities, meaning potential sites for development. We looked at development cost, regulatory barriers, and then we identified potential developers or investors that could be part of the solution. Looked at your housing programs. As Bo said, we surveyed employers and stakeholders, so some good results we got in the study for that. And then in the end, ultimately, what's the takeaway? What are the needs in this area? Again, all these estimates were only for Franklin, not the county as a whole. But nonetheless, it gives you some sense of, do we need more rentals, more for sale housing, different affordability levels. So with that said, a lot in the report. You're not going to see a lot of that in this presentation. I will say that my flight doesn't leave till almost 7 o'clock tonight, so I'm not in a hurry to get back. So I will stick around for a while. So if anybody wanted to come up to me individually and talk about one of these items or just something unique to you and your community or your personal interest, let me know and I'll see if I can help you out. All right, so this is, again, it says PSA, so that anytime you see that, you're going to see, I'm talking about Franklin itself, the city of Franklin, adding about 3,500 households over the next 5 years. So you've had this trajectory that you've been on. You're going to continue to be on that. So obviously with more household growth, you're going to have more of a demand for housing. In fact, I even show you here. This is probably a better breakout. So this breaks out basically the trends of growth in Franklin in that top part of that. But then the rest of the county, balance the county numbers versus the county as a whole, and then relative to Tennessee. If you look over to the far right-hand side, just showing you the growth, the projected growth from 25 to 30, you see again that 3,500 extra households that are expected to be added, 6,700 in the rest of the county, 10,000 county-wide. So that's part one, right? This study's got armed with a lot of population information. I won't even talk about households in this presentation, but check mark one, you've got growth, so you need more housing. I just had this conversation with a developer last week up in Michigan, and he's like, Mr. Bowen, so you have in our county, actually very close to the county numbers here, close to 10,000 new households, so that's all we need. Let's just build 10,000 units because we've got these households coming. But housing is more complicated than that I suspect most of you realize. So there's other things that drive the demand for housing, and I'll show you some of those things. All right, so one of the things I wanted to show you was the change in households by age groups. The dark blue is, and this is from 2025 to 2030, projected changes. So the dark blue is Franklin, that royal blue is the rest of the county. So where is everything expected to change among these different age groups? For Franklin itself, it's really most of that growth is in that 45 to 54 age group, and then really anything 65 and older, you could even say 55 and older. So you've got these segments growing, that's going to change some of the needs. Some of this is people relocating to this area. Some of this is just people aging in place. It's over the next 5 years. So somebody that's 54 will be 59 by the time the year 2030 hits. So some of this is just people moving up in these different age segments. But nonetheless, a lot of growth on these generally 45 and older for the city. The rest of the county, look at all that growth in that 25 to 34 age group. So a lot of younger people, probably younger families coming here. But that's no different than as well as in these senior groups, that 55 and older for the rest of the county. So these changes will affect what kind of housing this county and Franklin will need in the years ahead. All right, this is renter households. Top part is change in renter households from 2025 to 2030. Again, city in dark blue, the rest of the county in royal blue. Where's all the changes expected over this 5-year period? For the most part, both the city and the county, rest of the county, it's those that make over $100,000 a year. So you'll need higher end rental product. And with that said, one of the things I caution folks, because your numbers are different but similar to a lot of markets we see, you have that decline in those lower income households, essentially anything under $75,000 a year. So I see a lot of people look at that number and think, okay, then we don't need more affordable housing, we don't need more affordable, attainable, whatever you want to call it, rental housing. That's not what that's saying. It's declining modestly over this 5-year period. But I'll show you what folks live in and what they can afford and the lack of available housing for some of these lower moderate income households. So again, don't want people to say that means we don't need affordable or attainable workforce housing or senior housing. You do. But a great opportunity for higher end rentals. And at the bottom, I just show a breakout of the households by different income levels. And you can see about 20% of your renter households now, and by the year 2030 will make less than $50,000 a year, while the majority makes much, much higher. So you do have this segment of lower income households that their housing needs will have to be at least part of the discussion. And I'll tie that to workforce in a little bit, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is the change in renter households by size. I don't only put this in here, but I thought for especially developers in this area or other decision makers, this is the projected change over that 5-year period. Again, city in the dark color, rest of the county in the royal blue. And it's going to be those 1 and 2 person households in the city. So as you think about what kind of housing sizes, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, that might be needed, you can see this shift in demographics. And this is very similar to what we're seeing around the country, right? Millennials are having no kids or less kids, and seniors are aging, and so we've got a lot of folks, 1 and 2 person households, and I think that's going to drive a lot of the type of rental housing, smaller units that will be needed in the city in the years ahead, as well as the rest of the county. So we did the same thing for owner households. So these are owner-occupied housing units. Where's all the growth? Really over $100,000 a year over that 5-year projection period, and most of that is people making over $150,000 a year, so significant growth, both in the city and in the county, so that'll drive higher end product. I put in there, a household would need to have about an income of $262,000 to be able to afford a current house that you've got listed on the market, and I'll show you what you have available, but your current list price is $875,000. So you have to have $250,000 to be able to afford a home, and you just don't have a lot of renters, and you sure as heck don't have a lot of current homeowners that make that kind of income. And so that's gonna be a challenge for folks. And then at the bottom, I just show you again the distribution of households. Now much more concentrated as we look at owners among higher income households. And then I did the same thing, again, household sizes for owner households. A little bit different story, particularly for the rest of the county, outside of Franklin, where you can see a lot of these larger household sizes. And one of the things I did notice, I don't show it in this presentation, but you have, again, makes sense based on the composition of the household sizes you have and the growth that you have. But you have a lot of 4 and 5 bedroom homes in this county. And so obviously the builders are building to what people need and what they can afford. These larger household sizes will continue to drive that demand for bigger units. All right, so this is one of the things I wanted to get into, and that's housing affordability. Excuse me one second. So this is housing cost burden households. And so I put up the definitions at the bottom. So red, and this is, you would see this as these are federal definitions, so these are not Bowen coming up with these things. So in the red, housing cost burden households are people that make over 30%, spend over 30% of their income towards their housing costs. So I boxed that in red so you can see the numbers for Franklin versus the rest of the other areas. And then I even put in this yellow or orange color, whatever you want to call it, severe cost burden households. Those are folks that pay over 50% of their income towards their housing cost. I suspect there's nobody in this room that spends over half their income towards their housing cost. Yet, you have in just Franklin alone, if you look at the far right-hand side there, you have almost 4,500 households that do that. Another 6,100 in the rest of the county. So you have a lot of folks spending a disproportionately high share of their income towards housing costs. And for some, I'm not judging, but for some, they may say, well, they made that choice, they chose that job, they chose this market, or whatever. But if you set aside housing for just a second, or maybe we don't set it aside, if you think about the more money people spend on their housing costs, the less they get to spend on their economy, for their health care, for their kids, other essentials in life. So this is an economic issue. It does impact your local employers and businesses. A lot of folks struggling with the housing affordability. So I thought this would be a relevant one to put in here. This might surprise some folks or not. On the bottom left-hand side, these are the number of people that commute into Franklin every day, 76,000. Making up, I didn't know that, over 86% of your people that work in the city of Franklin don't live here. Why does that matter? Well, again, these are people coming in that earn wages in Franklin, and I'll tell you the county numbers in a second. I'll tell you now, it's about 110,000 people come into the county every day to work. So why does that matter to you? Should it matter to you? Well, these people earn their wages here, and short of them maybe buying lunch, running some errands or something, they're taking that money out of here, right? They're taking the earnings that they got here in this county, and they're taking it elsewhere. That is an incredibly high share, 86%, that are not living here but work here. And then on the right-hand side, I show you in that kind of the heat map of the blue shades, it shows you where these people are coming from. So again, a lot of them coming from, the county itself that are going into Franklin, but you can see in Davidson County and Murfreesboro or other areas, people are coming into the area. Probably one of the biggest takeaways is that in the pie chart, that dark blue, 14,000 people, or 16% of the people that commute into Franklin to work, travel over 50 miles a day one way. So it's 100 miles round trip to come and work in Franklin. We have the data for the rest of the county as well, or the county as a whole. But again, that's a challenge for the local workforce, and it's a challenge for the employers themselves because it's not uncommon. And if we have time to talk later, I'll talk about what this means to employers. But this certainly impacts employers when people have to travel a long distance because a lot of them will give up that commute at some point. I just can't sustain this. I got to find a job somewhere else. So we have a ton of data on the rental supply. I'm only going to show you a couple slides just to give you a high-end picture of things. So these are multifamily apartments. We surveyed 43 of these in Franklin. And just to get some kind of sample survey of the rest of the balance of the county, we had 12 of those surveyed. I boxed in that red box there the occupancy rates, and we have it by different levels. So it's market rate, tax credit. It's a low-income tax credit program, serves households in your area, households. They make about $57,000 to $92,000 a year. So that's tax credit rentals, you qualify for that. Or government subsidized housing, those would be households that make less than $57,000 a year. You can see your occupancy rates for each one of these. The affordable pieces are fully occupied. They have wait lists. So again, we're talking about what do people spend towards housing? Why do people spend more than half of their income towards housing, for which you have a lot? Because at least on this part of it, there is nothing available for them to rent. Overall, your occupancy rate at 95%, is that good or bad? I think a developer or investor would want that as close to 100% as possible. But this is a housing needs assessment. We want a market that's healthy. Typically, you want that occupancy rate to be about 94 to 96%. You want vacancies, right? As people's lives change, they have kids, get married, job changes, people coming in all those commuters that are coming in, they may want housing. And so you're right where you need to be. But with all the growth that you have among renter households over the next 5 years, probably beyond, you're going to continue to need to add housing. So you're healthy in terms of a balanced market in terms of that occupancy rate, but you got to keep going. You have to keep adding housing. And even for the balance of the county, it's at 93.2. Again, it's a much smaller survey, just 12 properties. It's probably where it needs to be. Certainly it could be a little bit higher. But a healthy rental housing market that will need additional inventory. This is the only other thing I put in here. Again, I could have done a ton of stuff talking about rentals. I just wanted to show you how the market rate rentals on the left-hand side, the city, again, dark blue versus the rest of the county in the Royal. And you can see how much higher the rents are in the city versus the county, the balance of county. And just to give you some kind of perspective, I think that's $1,705 in terms of that median rent for the one bed and one bath. I think that equates to about an income you need of about $68,000 to be able to afford that. So you can see, again, lower income households, why are they living in housing they can't afford? It's because rents are high. Even on the affordable side now, you can see how much lower under the tax credit program that serves households at $57,000 to $92,000 a year. Much, much lower, much more affordable. But that's why they're full. That's why there's wait lists for that type of housing. So another thing we looked at was what we call non-conventional rentals. So that's basically anything that's not an apartment. So single family home, duplex, mobile home, unit over a storefront, something like that, that's a non-conventional rental. And what we did was, and there's again tons of data we haven't studied, but for this slide, I wanted to put in here how many you have available. So it's 113 that were located in Franklin, another 82 in the rest of the county. If I compare that to all the non-conventional rentals in both of these geographies, I put in the red numbers what the vacancy rate would be. So for Franklin, it's 3.5%. For the balance of the county, 1.6%. Both of those below where you want to be. Remember, I said you want to be at 94 to 96% occupancy or 4 to 6% vacant. So again, a shortage here for rental housing. And these rents are pretty high. At let's take the 2 bedrooms for Franklin, because that represents most of the units. 2 bedrooms are larger. So median price at $2,600 a month. You'd have to have over $100,000 income to rent one of these units. I'm going to show you in a few minutes what the incomes of the bulk of much of your workforce, what they make, what they can afford. But keep these numbers in mind. I'll reiterate them when I show you that slide. But look at that rent, $2,600. A lot of the workforce just can't afford that. And again, what can they afford? we don't have that available for the multifamily apartments. So you can see some of the challenges that renters face in this area, or somebody that's trying to make a decision to come here, the challenge that they face because of the either lack of available housing or lack of affordable housing. All right, this is for sale housing. This is homes sold between 2021 and 2024. We do have information in the study, 2025 data. Didn't put it in here because it was only part of a year. I didn't necessarily want to draw conclusions on 2025 data. So we just show you these 4 full years, and you can see the home prices. Look at the median price. It's the green line. We'll start there first. It's $650,000 up to $815,000 just by 2024. It's about roughly like a 25% increase. So again, home prices escalating. We're seeing this all over the country. What is a little bit different here, the blue bars, by the way, that's the number of homes sold every year. So you can see in 2021, it was at 1,400, it dropped in 2022, and in 2023 kind of stayed level. Why? It's when we saw the interest rates go up, right? So it did have a tamping down of sales activity, but what it didn't do is it didn't slow down the prices. Now I've seen some markets, I'll say, Bo was asking me before how many of these bigger studies we do a year. These bigger studies we do about a dozen or 15. I would say about half of the ones we've done, we've seen the interest rates take hold and slow down the escalation of home prices. And so it happened here in 2022 and 2023, kind of flatline. And then here we go, 2024. And we're seeing that in a lot of markets around the country. It slowed down the home prices for a little bit, but now that's going back up in many markets. And so here, again, these are Franklin's numbers, not the rest of the county. You can see the escalation in home prices. So homes are not really affordable to a lot of folks, especially, again, the workforce. And you can see how they're just further going out of reach for a lot of people. And I'll show you here what's available. So these are all the homes that are available in the county. We outlined Franklin itself. The darker blue is the higher priced homes. Lighter colors, almost bordering on white, would be the lower priced homes. So you can see where those are dispersed throughout the area. So one of the things we did, we found that you had 283 homes that were available in Franklin. And again, I compared that to all the owner-occupied units that you have in the city. So when I compare those two together, those 283 that I cite at the very top comes back with an availability rate, it's like a vacancy rate, of 1.2%. Where do you want to be? Again, you want a healthy market, you want people to have choices. You want to be about 2 to 3%, and you're so far below that number. And so, again, another housing indicator that's saying you have a shortage in the market. You had 773 in the rest of the county. It equates to a 1.4% vacancy rate or availability rate. So limited availability of these homes, which again poses a challenge for people that are just trying to find anything, let alone the affordable stuff. So let's see what it is, what it looks like by price. So we'll do the table on the right, it's easier to read. It's the number of homes since August 11th. Franklin on top, the rest of the county on bottom. You can see how those 283 homes that were available in Franklin, where are those priced? Vast majority, over 80%, priced over $500,000. Only 3 homes available under $300,000. Now I realize that everything's relative to the community. I don't know too many communities where first-time home buyer homes would be considered anything over $300,000. Most people would say under $300,000 would be kind of more traditional first-time home buyer home. People transitioning from rentals over to home ownership. You have 3 of those in Franklin, 7 priced under $300,000 in the rest of the county, 10 countywide. And one of the things I often do, and I'll do it right now, is just to give it perspective. So I have 30 employees based just outside of Columbus, Ohio. Let's just say I love this place. Bo's convinced me this is the place to live. So I'm moving my company here, hypothetical. I'm moving my company here. So I tell my 30 employees, we're coming. We're gonna go down to Franklin or Williamson County, and the wages aren't changing. So they do their research. Let's say I don't have a study done, and they look, and they're gonna come back. I would say most of my employees would say, Patrick, I can't afford to rent. You saw what those rental rates were. And I sure as heck can't buy here. And I'm a homeowner now. Maybe I've got some equity, so maybe I can have a good down payment. But this area doesn't have the housing that my employees would be able to afford, rental or for sale. They would claim I need to give them a raise, but I'm just saying, to pay the bills and make a profit as a company, there's only so much I can pay. Now, that's only 30 people within a business. What about big companies? I know you have some big companies that have and are looking at relocating here. But those companies that come here better have really, really high wage paying jobs. But for, again, a firm like mine, a smaller firm, a middle-sized firm, even 100, 200 people type firm, there's only so much they can afford to pay their employees. It's going to be tough for those companies to make that commitment to come to a county like this. So again, I'll give you credit. You've been able to attract a lot of businesses here, but you can see where some companies may just look past this area because they say, I just can't make this work financially for my employees. Well, we also looked at senior care facilities, 24 of these. So this includes independent living, assisted living, and nursing homes. We surveyed 15 in Franklin, 9 in the rest of the county. I marked in the red box the occupancy rate for each one of the 3 segments. And if you see to the immediate right to those numbers, that's the national average or median. And you can see the independent living, assisted living very similar to the national numbers. Nursing homes a little bit lower. You might have had a facility that was having some issues that brought that number down. But you've got so much, if you saw earlier, right, the projected household growth among older households. You've got so much growth projected among these older households that this is a segment I certainly would think is going to grow and be needed. So it'll be a market that I would watch for opportunities. All right, so Bo said to me, Patrick, you got 2 minutes and you can just show 1 or 2 slides. This would be what I pick. This is the story. So these are the top, I think I picked 35. Top 35 occupations. I got half on this slide. I got half on the other slide, so I couldn't fit them all on one. So these are top 35. I didn't cherry pick these. These make up the greatest shares, not necessarily in the order. You can see the percent labor force share. But in the end, what these 35 occupations represent is about 45% of your workforce. Okay, so almost half of the workforce is right up here. And so I highlighted in red just one of them, made the font a little bit bigger, easier for you to see. We'll just take retail salesperson. At the lower quartile, their wages would be about $28,000. Median would be about $34,000. What can they afford to rent? 7-Eleven, $853, depending on which one I'm looking at. What can they afford to buy? $94,000 or $113,000. Anything you see in red in those 4 columns means that housing is not typical here. Remember, you saw those rents before for the non-conventional rentals, 2 bedrooms or larger, about $2,600. Those aren't even close. How about the multifamily rentals? I think the 1 bedrooms were, what, $1,700? Not even close to being able to afford a typical rental. Home prices, your list price, what, 8 something, 800,000? Look what these folks can afford. Now this is 1 wage earner. And I would suspect a lot of households have 2 wage earners or 2.5 jobs in the household. Maybe one of them has another job. Take any of those rents, you could double and triple them before you reach what is a typical rental for this area, for most of them. And home ownership, quadruple it. More before those workers can afford to rent or buy here. So all red, a little bit of black here, right? A few of these occupations. A registered nurse has a chance. And some of these other software developers, financial managers, they have a chance to rent reasonably, but nobody has a chance on their own to buy. But again, double those home prices on the far right-hand side. Triple them. Now you're getting closer. Quadruple them. Okay, now you're getting close to median. The point of all this is to say, look, housing is an economic issue. It's a workforce issue. And if I had more time, I'd give you examples, and maybe in the Q&A we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's a major challenge for communities all over the country. But your home prices and rents are so high that they are so misaligned with the workforce wages that this is a serious challenge for this area, for the employees, and definitely for employers. Just a few more here. So again, I only picked a few things I wanted to show you. We covered a lot of stuff. This is almost a combination of 2 things we looked at. These are development opportunities, meaning potential sites, And so through different sources, we found either vacant land or buildings that, properties that had some buildings on them that were possibly available for purchase that could represent development opportunities. One of the things we did, so we have a list of these properties, we have the sizes of the parcels, the buildings, the zoning, all kind of information in the study. And this is probably not all of the potential sites, and not all of these may be viable sites. Maybe they don't have access to water or sewer, some other reason that they're not a viable site. But we just wanted to get an understanding of, do you have a dearth of sites or do you have an abundance of them? So you have, a notable amount of sites. We overlaid your public transit route because we have a piece in the study that talks about public transit. And so one of the things we acknowledged in the study is to say, look, you have a lot of these sites that are near or on the public transit system. So if a goal, I'm not saying this should be, I'm just saying as a possible goal, if attainable, affordable workforce housing is a goal, you may want to consider some kind of transit-oriented projects, sites. Could you have incentives for them, to developers to do that type of housing that would accommodate those that rely on public transportation? So this is one of those things, again, we combine a couple topics to make a single point. Spent a lot of time, maybe some of the most intense time, looking back through your local regulations and comparing them with other areas. So this is an example on the right of some of the stuff we collected. But the takeaway for us when we looked at this is just Franklin, when we looked at the local zoning codes is it really does favor, again, a lot of communities do this, but it does favor single-family homes over multifamily development. That's probably pretty typical. But with that said, if a goal is to do, again, I'm not recommending, I'm just saying, if a goal that this community decides to do is, hey, we need to have more attainable, affordable workforce housing, and maybe the only way we can accomplish that is through higher density multifamily product. You can see when you don't have zoning that kind of accommodates, aligns with that, it's going to make it tough for developers to do the type of housing you may want. So we just wanted to acknowledge that in the study to make sure you understood what zoning means and does to residential development, and does it represent a barrier to certain development. Another thing we looked at was development costs. And so we looked at a lot of different things. I listed them on the left, highlights on the right. We go into a lot more detail in the study itself, but for easy processing, I put the X's and the check marks on the left. Basically meaning if it's an X, that means that Franklin is at a disadvantage relative to other areas in the region that we looked at for these same topics. If it's a check mark, that means it's aligned or it's in a good position with other communities. So you can see half of these things we looked at, particularly the sewer impact fee, the overall impact fee, but even the list price, vacant land prices, and even wages for construction jobs are higher. That may put the area into a competitive disadvantage for some of the other areas. So we want to acknowledge that. And then the housing gap estimates. So we broke it out by, this is 2025 to 2030. You have a housing gap of over 10,000 units. We broke it out by these different affordability levels. So on the left-hand side is the lowest income households. So we have a percent of median household income, which for most of you probably is irrelevant. But for those that deal with affordable housing and different programs, that's absolutely pertinent to them because they're tied to those percentages of area median income. So I wanted to at least let them see what are we talking about. But for everybody else, I have the corresponding household income. And then under rentals, I put the rental rates that corresponds to, and then the gaps for each one of those. And we do the same thing for home sales or for sale housing, the price points, and then the corresponding gaps. And so you can see for rentals, it's really across the board. There's really no difference what affordability level is. You need all types of housing to continue to have a good, healthy, balanced market, especially as you move ahead in the next 5 years. And then for the for sale housing, a little bit different story, where it's really housing priced over $300,000 is the greatest need, but there's still a need and opportunity for product priced under $300,000. As I showed you before, you have almost nothing priced under $300,000, so there is a need for that kind of product. It's not as big as those other numbers. Now, one of the things that I think, just doing this for as long as I have, a lot of communities look at this and say, okay, we have 10,000 housing units in terms of a gap. Let's build 10,000 units. That's not what this is saying. You have a need and an opportunity for 10,000 units to solve, and this is just Franklin's numbers, by the way. And so you have this need for 10,000 units that need to be addressed. But that could be done through a combination of things. One of the things I didn't show you is substandard housing. The number is small in Franklin, but nonetheless, there's some people living in Franklin and in the rest of the county that live in lower quality housing that we would all consider substandard, that really should either be replaced or renovated. So you can renovate some of this. So some of that is just counting housing that is needs renovating. Some of this accounts for people that are severe cost burden. Remember, I said those are people who pay over half their income towards housing costs. You can build new housing that's affordable to them, or there are ways to provide subsidies either to the tenants, like vouchers or something like that, or through individual properties, a subsidy through those properties. So again, you don't have to build your way out of these housing challenges. There's combinations of things to do. So keep that in mind as we all have discussions in the months and years ahead of what's the best way to do this. There's many ways. And then lastly, here's the recommendations. So nothing really surprising probably to most of you. You have data now to set goals and priorities, and that's really what those housing gaps are for. You do want to think about aligning some of the affordable housing alternatives that you may do as you move ahead with public transportation. Continue to support the development of a variety of high-end product. You've got so much growth of higher income households. You do need to continue to build this higher end product, both rental and for sale, so don't lose sight of that. But you do want to somehow think about incentivizing or encouraging affordable workforce housing development. It's certainly needed, but a lot of times developers cannot pull that off because of just the cost associated with development of affordable housing just doesn't work for them. There's things you can do with policies, encourage and support higher density development. Again, I talked about density and this area favoring single family home development over higher density multifamily. Senior-oriented housing is something that certainly needs to be considered, especially more maintenance-free housing, because some seniors age in place, they don't want to be maintaining their homes, they just want a place that they can live to, downsizing to. With your numbers as big as they are, and as much as the growth that you're expecting among seniors, you definitely want to think about that. Reorganize and reprioritize. The Franklin Housing Commission, Bo said he's a member of that. We didn't go to a deep dive of what that organization is and does, but now, if that organization wanted to recommit itself to its housing efforts for this area, they certainly have data points to look to sit as an organization and say, how do we rethink what we're doing? How do we rethink our goals and things like that? So, and I work with different groups, so I can certainly talk to you about that if that's something you want to chat about later. Last couple here, consider implementing proactive approach to attract and involve housing development partners. We have in the study, I think, over 60 different groups out there that could be part of the solution that you might want to reach out to. Support and expand education outreach campaign to support certain housing efforts. This is part of it, right? Today, here, having this conversation, I know there's elected officials in the room, so this is part of that process. Let's educate everybody on this. Why does this matter? What does housing mean for employers, employees, and just for the overall health of the community? And then even creating some kind of online housing resource center. I've seen some folks do some things that makes it easier for developers, investors, lenders, the citizens themselves, people wanting to relocate to the area in terms of what is your housing situation, what are my resources, and so you could do something like that. I've seen very few communities do anything with that, but I know communities are looking into that now, especially after we do a presentation. They're trying to rethink how do they provide the resources and information for whomever might be curious about housing. And that's it. That's my contact information. Again, I'll stick around after. I know we're going to do the Q&A thing, I think, as a group, right? So we'll do that, and then, but I'll stick around afterwards if anybody just wants to come up and chat with me. So with that said, thank you for letting me do this.
So while Matt's pulling that up, you will see the QR code with the study. It's also on our website, which is wcartn.org/housing study.
Great. We'll give you a second to look at that. We also have an option to text in questions. I'll try to get to as many as I can in the next probably 20 or so minutes. At this point, I'm thrilled to welcome the panel to the stage. I have Patrick Bowe, Matt Wiltshire, a good friend of mine. He is the president of Pathway Housing Fund and a senior VP of Affordable Housing and Pathway Lending. And then Keely, who you met earlier as well. So we'll go ahead and jump in. Like I said, you know what? It's probably best just to do this because I can actually kind of monitor monitor these things at the same time. So we'll go ahead. Patrick, thank you. Fantastic information, deep dive. Thank you both for financing this study. It's really important. And I think, Patrick, you talked about several times, if the community decides that they want to go this route, here's the data that supports that. So I think you gave us a lot of different directions to go. And Patrick, you did mention at one point, this is not unique to Williamson County or Franklin. We're seeing this across the country, right? And so kind of let me start. And I noticed too, you've done studies for communities across the nation. Who is most like us? Who faces similar challenges? And what can we learn from those communities?
Testing. So this is one of those moments where you're sitting in this, like I am, and going, did I put on matching socks? Because everybody can see my socks. Am I good? So again, thanks for letting me do this and be part of this. I guess the good news is, one, that you're not alone. The nation's facing a housing crisis. We get to go into all these markets, and they're different. They have different situations, circumstances, political willpower, public sentiment, financial resources, and things like that. There are communities, though, like yours, that are high growth, like a Grand Rapids, Michigan, Asheville, North Carolina, to bring it a little bit closer. Maybe not as much growth, but a Chattanooga, Tennessee, not affluent as this area. But these are areas that face growth challenges, and so they all are trying to do different things that fit their community. I will tell you this, one of the benefits of working with us, and so hopefully you'll reach out to me after this, and if the commission really wants to ramp up efforts, I can put you in contact with a lot of these communities, because the benefit will be, guess what, folks? People make mistakes. Communities have good things in mind. They have good intentions. They think what they're going to do is going to create some kind of result that they want to see in terms of housing, and it doesn't quite work the way they want. So there are examples out there. I don't know if you want me to go through a couple or how you want me to.
Well, before you do that, first question, again, this is the number to text in. This is probably a clarifying question. Did the housing gap analysis include already approved but not yet built inventory? Currently about 10,000 units.
Yeah, so we do have in our housing gap estimates, we did account for what's in the development pipeline if the properties were approved and we had confidence that they were financed, because there's some properties that just somebody's maybe in the planning stages or discussion stages. We wouldn't count those because we don't know if those will materialize. But yes, anything that we know were confirmed, we would account for those.
Great, thank you, Patrick. And it does, because I'm actually looking at this and ask questions, so if you got any more, please feel to ask them. Before we go to kind of examples, Bo, I'll just jump to you. What's your biggest takeaway from the study, and did it give you any sort of specific ideas?
Sure. I have some takeaways, but I also have some pre-takeaways. So, before this dream really even became a reality, when we were still in the, not even the planning discussion, when this was just an idea that our association had, I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised, but not really surprised at the commitment from community stakeholders, but also our elected officials. Before this pen to paper on this an idea, one of the first people we sat down with as an organization was Alderman Greg Caesar. We sat down with Jason Ponce, and the commitment from them and from all of BOMA that, this isn't just a talking point. And I don't think this, to me, one of my takeaways is this shouldn't be a wake-up call per se, but I look at it as a call to action, and I know our BOMA members are going to look at it as a call to action for everybody in this room, because we've all heard the data that was in there. We've heard this in various presentations, but now to actually be able to see it in one comprehensive place and be like, oh wow, those numbers are actually just real. They're not out there in the never region. So I'm excited for the takeaways of what our community leaders are going to be able to do with this information, and how all of us in this room can help be part of that solution.
Great, thanks. And Matt, we'll jump to you, because Patrick references several times about what challenge are you trying to solve. I've heard you talk at different forums about how you've got to start with that question, right? And frame the work that you do with trying to figure out what problem you're actually trying to solve. I think, one, talk about why that's so important, Matt, but also, two, you've championed some statewide legislation that gives communities more tools to be involved and engaged and try to address this issue. So I'd love for you to kind of two-part, why is it important to pick the problem you want to solve, And then what tools are available to our community to help make progress in some of these issues?
First of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, Patrick, I think you need to share your Venmo with all of us. We owe you a tuition payment for a graduate level class in housing and housing affordability. I'm in the housing space now, and that was a master class. So thank you for that. Well, you may be the graduate school professor. I'm sort of the more 101 entry level guy. And to answer your two-part question in two parts, I think the first message I would want to give to you all is just remember that it's all supply and demand. The reason housing is so expensive in Williamson County is because Mayor Moore and Mayor Anderson and your elected officials and your community folks and your chamber has done too good of a job making this too attractive a place for folks to live. And that's just true. A lot of people want to be here. If they didn't want to be here, the cost of housing would not be so high. That's the demand side. The supply side is you have also chosen to limit the growth in supply. And part of that's related to the demand, right? Folks want to be here because they don't want to be in a big congested space, and they want to be able to have it, and they're willing to pay for it. And this comes into the other part of supply and demand, that you have attracted so many high-wage jobs, those folks need a place to live too. When we talk about the retail worker or the lower income, but the rich folk need a place to live too, and they're willing to pay for it. And so the housing stock, some of it that exists here, has been purchased and repurposed into much more expensive housing. And that's just facts. Like, that's what's happening. And so that supply and demand, there's a couple things you could do about it. You could reduce the demand for housing here. Like, stop hiring police, let crime go through the roof, stop, make the schools crappier. I don't think that you want to do that, right? And so, if you really want to do something about the cost of housing, and you don't have to, but if you want to, you're going to have to add supply. That's it. So that's the 101 level. You asked about specifics, and I don't want to go on too long here, but I think it is important to get really specific. I was having a conversation earlier at the table about, man, what do we do about housing affordability? Every time you bring that topic up, folks' heads explode. And I think that the idea of housing affordability is really scary to people because they like their 5-acre lot. They like the lack of traffic through their neighborhood. And the idea of that changing is really scary, rightfully so, to a lot of people. So I think what you need to do is talk about the specifics of what it is that you want to do. And that starts with trying to solve a particular piece of this puzzle. And I think one of the great things that Patrick did was really break this down between ownership and rental. Between what's affordable to someone who's coming straight out of college, or someone who's a midpoint in their career, or someone who's a CEO. Each of those people cares about affordability, and there are tools and levers that you can pull to address each one of them. And so I feel like I've talked too much, so I won't get into the specifics of what I did, but there was a particular piece of that puzzle where I was just copying something that folks in North Carolina had done, but I found that it was not allowed under state law in Tennessee, and so we'd like to try and change it. We can talk about that more later if there's time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's great. Keely, we'll go to you, and this is a combination of what I said. I sent you ahead of time and also a question from the audience. So talk about the financing piece. What's the biggest challenge in finding financing for development of workforce housing? And maybe as you answer that, touch on things that have been floated like affordable mortgages, 50-year mortgages, as you kind of answer that question. So kind of a two-part as well.
Yeah, okay, so first a disclosure, we've got graduate level, we've got 101 bachelor's level. I'm the third grade guy. So I am not an economist, I'm not an attorney, but I do have a couple of thoughts on the 50-year mortgage that was proposed. Both of the two things that you just mentioned, 50-year mortgages and portability of mortgages, would be what I would call a blunt instrument. So those are going to be more sweeping changes that would affect not only the housing market, but the economy at large, the investment markets as well. So there's some benefits to those. So I'll do 50-year mortgage first and then portability of mortgages. 50-year mortgage, it's not entirely dissimilar from when we went from 15-year mortgages to 30-year mortgages, which would have been 1948 was when they allowed 30-year mortgages for the first time on new construction. 1954, they allowed it on current products, current homes. It didn't really become broadly accepted until about 1960-ish or so. But since that time, 30-year mortgages has been the gold standard. That's been the vast majority of what people use for their mortgages. But at that time, it was crazy, right? You're doubling the term of the mortgage. So a lot of the same things would apply today. I do want to give some examples just of how the math would work. If you say, well, if I do a 50-year amortization, I'm automatically going to be able to afford far more house. Sort of. If you look at a $500,000 mortgage, so more kind of that affordability, quote-unquote affordability, not yet affordable, but closer. $500,000 mortgage, the difference between a 30-year amortization and a 50, you're gonna have to bump up the rate just a little bit because it's a higher risk product, right? That's how the mortgage market works. So you give it a little tiny bit of a rate premium, and you save about $200 a month on a $500,000 mortgage. You go to an $800,000 mortgage, it's about $300 a month. That's significant. That could give somebody who's right now looking at, an $800,000 home, the ability to buy an $850,000 home. That's significant, especially for those people. However, it also comes with its drawbacks. If you look at being in a home for, say, 12 years, which is now about the average. Is that about right for you guys? You guys know better than I do. It used to be 6 or 7 years that we would say the average tenure in a home would be. It's gotten to be about 11 or 12 now. So you go 12 years in a home. If you've gotten that $500,000 mortgage, and you're working on a 12-year amortization, 12 years into that amortization, you've saved about $105,000, or paid down on your principal about $105,000. If you do that same mortgage over a 50-year amortization, 12 years in, you will have paid down about $24,000 on that mortgage. It's a big deal. And when you talk about the advantages of home ownership versus home rentership, that difference is huge. So, always unintended consequences, right? So those are some unintended consequences to individuals. It's all theory right now. It hasn't even been proposed truly. So what we talk about is all hypothetical, but those are some thoughts to think through, and there's many, many others. The portability is actually more intriguing, I think, for our current local predicament, our United States predicament, in that so many people aren't selling their houses. You all know this because they got a 3% mortgage about 5 years ago, and they ain't touching that thing. And if they sell their house, they have to pay that off and get a new mortgage at 6 1/4 or whatever it may be. So nobody's interested in doing that, and so therefore houses aren't selling. They're not turning as much. If you make mortgages portable, where I can take that 3% and put it on that next house that I'm buying, that could be a game changer. And I think it could, but boy, do we have unintended consequences with that. So, number one, the theory of doing that, I think, is probably just that on the current mortgage situation. We all signed contracts for our 3% mortgages that said, when we move, we pay it off. And if we don't, that's a breach of contract. I don't think legally that's going to be a likelihood unless there's some other sort of government intervention to make those investors whole that bought those mortgages when we packaged them up, which is possible, but it would take a significant government intervention there. What it would do, though, is ease some anxiety for people who are buying homes now. What happens if 5 years from now, interest rates go to 11%? Do I really want to buy a home with that possibility? So if you make it a portable possibility, it could alleviate some angst there. But again, there's so many ripple effects that would affect the securities market, because mortgages are originated by a bank, packaged up and sold on the secondary market. those are based on an average duration of somewhere between 6 and 12 years. If that duration is monkeyed with by the portability of mortgages, everything, the whole table that we use to price those things blows up and we have to reinvent it again. So lots of things involved there.
Yeah.
The latter part of your question, or the other part
Well,
of your
let's
question?
move on, just because we've got 9 minutes left, so we're moving to a lightning round. To the degree you can, a lot of questions, really appreciate it. I knew this would be tight. This is how we do things. We always overdo it. But anyway, I'll go to you, Patrick, for the next question. I saw on the graph you had 2 different distinct areas of age groups that were growing in Williamson County. One being the senior age group, the senior as well. So would love to know how other communities that are similar to ours are addressing the aging in place housing shortage. If you have any thoughts on that.
First off, I think you're 4th grade worthy. Okay. Well, there's a lot
Going
of
from 3rd grade to 4th grade in Tennessee that's an issue.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with it. I'm not. Well, I know that a lot of communities are trying to solve multiple issues, and so I know that trying to accommodate seniors that might want to downsize, at the same time trying to free up housing for modest to lower income households that want to enter into home ownership. So one of the solutions through that is build more senior housing, right? To get those seniors out of their homes that maybe they've been in 30 or 40 years, that maybe need some love and attention, and so they're more affordable. But by getting them out of those homes, now you've just freed up this inventory for first-time home buyers. So that's one of the ways to do it. I don't know that I've seen any communities do any kind of incentive to try to encourage senior development, but it certainly should be on everybody's radar, especially this area, just because of the data you just pointed out, that we've got so much growth here in terms of senior households. So it certainly needs to be discussed.
Okay, great, thanks. So we'll go again back to the questions that were texted in. Probably this is Matt and Bo and Patrick, probably jump in. We spoke about how the challenge is not unique to Williamson County. What specific innovative policy initiatives have their communities or states, like you said, North Carolina, have pursued and seen real success with? So we'll start with the North Carolina piece and talk about what you learned from that, and then anybody else jump in, please.
I want to know what Bo did to piss you off to get the small chair. You got the short chair. You owe him for that.
Well, the plan was for me to be in that too, so we'd both be in the small chairs, but I just decided to be here, so sorry about it.
Plagiarism is the greatest form of flattery. And so I would encourage you guys, I mean, you asked Patrick the question, I would encourage you guys to figure out specifically the problem that you want to solve. The senior housing one, I think, is actually a great idea. There are massive demographic trends towards aging seniors, and you mentioned all the 4 and 5 bedroom homes that a senior couple's living in, right? I mean, that seems like a misallocation of resources. So, but figure out the specific problem that you want to address. The one that I was most conscious of in Nashville was what you guys have seen across our community, maybe not as much in Williamson County, but older apartment stock that was affordable to working Nashvillians, working Tennesseans, but because of this demand from higher wage earners, a lot of that product was getting purchased, painted, landscaped, and the rents were jacked up 40%. And the folks who lived in those units were being displaced. And I use some negative terms when I say that, but really, that's just because there were folks who could afford to pay $1,600 and they needed a place to live too, and so that value-added real estate developer was meeting demand in the marketplace. The problem is, once that $1,000 a month apartment goes away, it is never, ever coming back. Ever. Maybe you can build some light tech, maybe. But to me, the most cost-effective way to solve this problem was to hold on to the housing that we had. And so there was this great example, this group, Ascent Housing in Charlotte, North Carolina, that had figured out sort of creative financing way to do this. I went and essentially was going to just replicate their model in Nashville in partnership with them. No infringement there. And then I came to find out that state law in Tennessee didn't allow a critical piece of this, sort of the secret sauce in the recipe you couldn't do under Tennessee state law. We won't get into that. It has a whole bunch of complexity in it. But what I do want to deliver from this message is, I took a bill like me. Like I got a friend to write a bill. I found the only two sponsors who were available, who both happen to be Democrats, and Democrats don't have a great track record of getting stuff passed in the state legislature. But this issue is such a critical issue to folks across the state that a bill carried by two Democrats for housing affordability passed the Senate and the House. And what I think that says is, one, their bipartisanship is not totally dead, but two, like, go come up with a good idea or go find it. And then you too can make the change. And I think there was real receptivity and openness to those ideas. This one specifically had to do with sort of cities supporting it, and your industrial development board can issue affordable housing bonds to help address the part of this. And I would encourage you all to explore that alternative. But go find a good idea, figure out the problem you want to solve, go figure out who's done it well, copy that idea, and then make it happen in your community. And if there's some reason that any one of those steps you can't do, there are ways around it, including getting law changed at the state.
Well, and I think, Matt, to your point, this is something that is addressed or solved as a partnership with the public and the private sector. That sort of gets overused. It's cliche, but it's really true in this case, especially when 90 and 95 counties in Tennessee are growing and experiencing, something to this effect in different communities. Again, we're kind of running up on time. I know, Patrick, you'll stick around for questions. I know there are a lot of questions here. So just a couple things. First of all, one text, I think this is really important for this room to keep in mind. Your example is about a company moving from out of the area, moving all their employees. Well, we know when we work with a company, they're really looking at what's your pipeline of workforce locally. How are you graduating students at your colleges? 60% of the students who graduate from national colleges stay right here. Who is willing to move back here for the jobs? And then how are you working with people in your community that are looking for higher wage jobs and career ladders? Great example is Mitsubishi. When Mitsubishi moved here, they brought a core group. 85% of the employees that are in Mitsubishi's headquarters now are locally hired. That's what happens. And that's what happened with Nissan as well. Not that higher percentage, but it was. The majority were hired locally. So I think it's important to keep in mind is we're not necessarily just talking about bringing people from other parts of the country. It's like I started. This is about your kids and grandkids being able to move back here for the careers we help attract and create. So as we kind of close, Patrick, you sort of touched on this, but what other communities should we be looking at and examining? Every couple of years we take a trip, visit cities across the country, Dallas, Denver, DC, cities that are growing, Austin, and try to learn from them. But in your experience, Patrick, doing work across the country, where should we focus?
Well, I mentioned them before, so we'll bring it a little bit closer to this area. So again, Chattanooga is not the same as this area, but Chattanooga has been very progressive and creative in a lot of their strategies for trying to figure out a way, how do we support particularly the attainable, affordable workforce housing and maybe even senior housing to a degree. And so there's a good roadmap there. I got notes. I won't read off all those the different programs, but I was really impressed with what Chattanooga is doing. Asheville, North Carolina, I've done a lot of work in Asheville for the last 12 years, a lot of studies for the city, and they have been very progressive. Again, the things they're doing may not match, but there are roadmaps out there. There's also bigger sources. One of them is called localhousingsolutions.org, their website, Local Housing Solutions. If you were a fourth grader trying to learn about housing, you get on that website, it's a lot, but you would get it. You would see what the different options or alternatives are, and then examples of what communities have done. There's another document called the Housing Supply Playbook, done by the American Planning Association and the National League of Cities, and they just put that out this last year, and that's another example. If you didn't know much about housing, but you were trying to figure out what solutions are possible, that is another great resource to go to. They also provide examples of other cities that they have studied and believe are worthy of mention and possible exploration. So resources out there. I mentioned Asheville and Chattanooga, but there's other bigger sources just to get you started and educated and up to speed on what's possible.
Great. And again, I hate to cut this conversation short. Join me in thanking our panelists today. Really appreciate you all making the time to be here. Apologize if I didn't get to everybody's questions. I'm sorry about that. But I love that there's so much interest in this topic. And like I said, Patrick will stick around. Everybody else stick around for a few minutes if you're able to stick around. So sure. What else are you going to do, Matt? A lot of things, I know. Matt and I are friends. So, all right, let me just close this out today. Look, we've talked about this, right? Housing is the epicenter of everything we do. It determines where our workforce can live, influences where schools are built, shapes traffic patterns, and ultimately impacts the long-term health of the entire community. It touches every sector, it touches every family. We know this. So, as an organization, we're in concert, like we always do with businesses and organizations that really want to make a lasting impact in Williamson County and create, again, I mentioned this earlier, the starter home that your kids and grandkids can move back to our community and eventually be your neighbor. So we want to really take that lead in creating these opportunities for housing like we do when it comes to careers in Williamson County, like Matt mentioned earlier. That really is a team effort here, right? And so as we close today, I just want to leave you all with a few photos from a ribbon cutting about a month or so ago that we did with our friends at Hard Bargain. Celebrating the opening of 2 new homes. This was about, I think, a 1,400 or 1,600 square foot house. But this is the kind of thing we're talking about. These are the kind of homes our kids and grandkids need as they launch their careers and begin their adult lives in Williamson County. I know it's not easy to put together financing for projects like these. Derek Solomon, who's the executive director at Hard Bargain, does a fantastic job of making homes like these a reality. And one of the speakers that day talked about how important it was to define what exactly we're talking about when we think about the idea of starter homes for people in our community as well. So again, thanks everybody for being here. Really appreciate that. Also, I want to make sure to let you know that another place where your voice really makes a difference is in a transit master plan survey that's actually being done right now in this city of Franklin. So this public input in this will guide decisions they make. So please scan the QR code so the leaders have the insight that they need from the business community to make the changes necessary, as was brought in earlier, about what the role transit can play in helping housing in the future. I'm going to just take another minute and thank Wilson Bank and Trust. Thank you, Keely, for your sponsorship today. United Communications, William, thank you for the sponsorship too. Also, Williams County Association of Realtors. This was a massive undertaking, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate, the people in this room appreciate, the work you did in making this study reality. Patrick, thank you as well. Feel free to grab one of the magazines that just came out this week, Livability magazines as well. And thank you all for your continued investment in Williamson County, with your investment in Williamson Inc. Have a great day.